Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by Actor L.Q. Jones. L.Q., how are you?
Terrible good, sir, and you. It's a pleasure to hear you.
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking, and it's a pleasure to hear from you. I've been a big fan of yours for a very long time, so this is an absolute honor and a privilege to speak with you today. First things first, on April 22nd through the 24th, you'll be appearing at the 7th Annual Cowboy Up for Vets event in Swanton, Ohio. How excited are you for this event?
Mike, this is what's great fun for me. I get to do a bunch of shows all over the country, the world, actually. But this one is another one of those dear to my heart, where they're dealing with and for the veterans. And whenever that's afoot, it's great fun, and all you got to do is let me know, and I'll show up on your doorstep.
This event will be the largest ever cast reunion for a TV show that you did 25 episodes of, The Virginian. Now, I know you just said that the veterans are near and dear to your heart, and you love going to events like this, but the show, The Virginian, how near and dear is that to your heart?
Mike, it's hard to answer that, really. I adored the people. I enjoyed the show. But I've been very, very lucky. They tell me I've done, 113 movies and something between 400 and 500 television shows. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to pick out one and say, this is the optimum, because they were all fun. This one was especially fun for me because it came along at a time when I got to work with people that I had adored in the business for years, and now I'm standing talking with them.
I saw an interview you did at the 60th anniversary of Gunsmoke, and in that interview you said that the reason why the show looked so good and the reason why everyone enjoyed making the show is because the cast of Gunsmoke was like a big family. Now, I'm just curious, was the cast of The Virginian, was that also a family?
It was. The only difference is that that was a bigger family than they had in Gunsmoke. Mm-hmm. Gunsmoke was down to, 5 or 6 people. In The Virginian, good heavens, we must have had 12, 15 people that were working in the entire show. And so, yes, it was just like a family, and for me, it's going to be great fun because I haven't seen a lot of them for years. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like bumping into a cousin again.
Who from the cast are you looking forward to seeing the most?
It's impossible to say. Each one for a different reason. Of course, Jimmy and I have worked together for years and years and years. Actually, I did a lot more shows than 25. I think it's closer to 70. But we were really old and dear friends. The rest of them, the same way. Just you don't see them as often, and so the exchange is slightly different. That is with Jimmy and I.
What was your favorite episode? And if you don't know the name of it or whatever, that's not a big deal. But what was your favorite episode working on The Virginian? If you don't know the name of the episode, just give us the storyline and what your character was doing in it. Do you have a favorite episode?
Mike, I really don't. I was allowed to play a character named Belden, who was representing the blue-collar workers, so to speak, on the ranch. And they had plugged me in places that they wanted explanations, they wanted some comedy, they wanted some violence, whatever. And, gosh, Mike, it's tough in a situation like that to pick one. Like if you ask me what's my favorite movie, I'm going to tell you it's the next one I do. Because every one of them, each one, I should say, has a flavor, has fun, has relationships. You don't think of it, really. But when you're working on a picture, it can be a TV show where you're doing it in 3 days or 2 weeks, or one like with Peck and Paul where you're working for 4.5 months. For Christ's sakes, you form the relationship. You work closely. They're there with you every day. You're in a quote family, if you will, and then at a point, 2 weeks in the future, 4 months in the future, your family dissolves, and you never ever get together again with exactly the same people doing exactly the same work. And it is a very strange but a very warm feeling in our business. So it's hard to answer your question in that regard.
When you go to an event like Cowboy Up for Vets or some of the other events that you've done similar to what you're going to do on April 22nd through the 24th, did you ever think, back when you were making all these great TV shows and all these movies, did you ever think that it would have made that kind of impact that it is? Because obviously these shows that you've done happened decades ago, but people are still enjoying them, and people, they love hearing the stories, and they love seeing guys like you, and they love interacting with them. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that the movies and TV shows you made would make the kind of impact that they've had?
Not for a second, Mike. You think, well, I have to do this, that, and the other today, and this tomorrow. You don't really think about it, but when you look at it and realize exactly what you said, we did these things years ago, and I had absolutely no idea that they would last past the first time they show them on TV. That's going to be the end of it. But again, as you pointed out, that was not the end. And yes, the audiences for these shows about Westerns seems to grow. It does not diminish. It gets bigger every year. So yes, it was, really, I didn't believe I'd ever see this happen, but it's happening. Let's
go back to the beginning. How did you get into acting?
You don't want to hear that, Mike. It takes too long. I don't mind telling you, but it's one of those things in our business, Mike, where it was written up. It's been written up in, 10, 12, 15 magazine stories about how unusual things are that you get into the business, and mine was as unusual practically as you get. So I'm not being clever. I don't mean to shut you down. I'll be glad to tell you, but it is a fairly long encounter.
How about we skip the long story? Just answer this question for me.
Okay.
Was that your dream? Was your dream to become an actor, or was it something that you just fell into? Like, did you ever think about acting?
Mike, yes. I was to be a doctor or an attorney, and that's what the family wanted, and that's what I was training for. That's what I went to college for. But to be an actor, better a friendly neighborhood rapist than an actor. So it never occurred to me. I just enjoyed entertaining people, but it never occurred I could do it professionally. But lo and behold, it happened.
Everyone has their own definition of what they consider to be their big break. Some actors say that their big break was their first paid acting gig. Some actors say their first big break was the first time they were credited in a movie or a TV show. Some actors say the first time they got a starring role is their big break. Some people say the first time they won an award for a particular film or TV show they did is their big break. What do you consider your big break?
I'm pausing, Mike, because there were so many of them. You alluded to how I got in the business. Here is a business today. It's still the same. When I was in it, it was even tougher, I guess. It's a brutal business. It's great fun, and there are great people in it, but it's tough, to get in and tough to stay alive. And you look on it that way, but I was extraordinarily lucky. I had people at the first, when I had no reason for them to get involved, were helping me prepare a sketch to do for a tryout at Warner Brothers, even to the point of writing scripts for me to take the place of what the rest of the people were going to try out with. And when that was done, then to have Raoul Walsh, who at the time was one of the great people in the business, he and Michael Curtiz kept Warner Brothers afloat for about 10 or 15 years, stick his neck out and say that because they being the studio, were wanting to use someone that they had used before or who were professional, had been in the business. They literally tested over 250 people, but Raul stuck his neck out and said, no, I want this kid to do it. And they said, well, that doesn't make any sense. He says, it makes sense to me. Either he does the part or you can get yourself another director. Well, there's no reason for his doing that, but Warner Brothers wasn't dumb enough to get rid of Raul Waltz, so I got the shot. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm with you.
Okay, that's it. So that was the break for me. From that point on, I'd been in town exactly, I think, 2 days visiting Fess Parker. Remember Fess?
Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone, of course.
Right. Well, Fess and I were roommates in college for about 2.5 or 3 years, and I was just out here because he said to come on out, and it was a visiting thing, but things happened, and there I'm standing in front of a camera. Mm-hmm. So you never know, people. You never know.
Are Westerns your favorite genre to work in?
You bet. No doubt about it. Oddly enough, I have done probably more non-Westerns than I did Westerns. It came along at a time, and it's a genre that I really... What kid doesn't grow up pretending to be a cowboy with cowboys and Indians, or the sheriff? We all did. I certainly did. So, in my particular case, hell, I was living a dream. Just to be allowed to come in and watch them work, but to be part of it was beyond my comprehension. I couldn't do it, but I was lucky, and it went on for me, still going on. Let's see, that would be 46. That would be 62 years that I've been at it, and I'd still love to jump in something and go do a Western tomorrow morning.
What do you like better? Because I know earlier you mentioned that you've done 113 movies and anywhere from 400 to 500 TV shows. What do you like making better, movies or TV?
Well, each one gives you something different, Mike. The TVs are good because you don't have to. You do it. You've got a script. You do it. You do it once. They would like for you to do it once and have a print. Maybe you go twice, maybe 3 times, and in 2 weeks you're over it and you're off to something else. When I got started in the business, I guess I averaged out something around 2 months for each movie that I was in. Different approach. People react differently. They are more relaxed. And for a performer, to me, it was much more fun doing the Western, just because you had more time, you had more chance to, again, put that family together. You had a longer time. If you made a mistake, it didn't cripple the whole operation, and you could do it again. Although you don't like to do it again, you like to do it in one shot. But it's a different way of life. When I came along, as a matter of fact, television was the king of the walk. They were making very few movies, but I got into the business sideways. I did, good heavens, about 6 or 7, maybe 10 movies before I ever walked on the set for a TV. And yet, each one has its charm. Each one has its fun. I don't mean to be Pollyannish about this. I'll snap your head off with an opinion if I really have one, but you're asking questions about where I live, and I'm trying to answer them as honestly as I can without going on forever. Go ahead.
The first movie you ever appeared in, Battle Cry.
Right, you bet.
You played Private L.Q. Jones, and later you adopted that name, and that became your stage name. Now, I'm just curious, is that your legal name now, or are you still Justice McQueen?
McQueen is my legal name.
Okay.
The Jones is A.K.A.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to adopt the name L.Q. Jones?
Well, if you understand the business, and you do probably a lot better than a lot of your listeners do, you're looking for name recognition in the business, especially when you get started. You got to be crazy, though, to change your name from Justice McQueen to L.Q. Jones, but it came along because I'd gotten a start in the business well beyond what 99 and 9/10% of the rest of the people in the business, and so L.Q. was working fine for me, but I hit a slow point, meaning I didn't work 1 week, and I panicked, of course. If you remember, Leon Uris was the man who wrote Battle Cry, and Leon and I had become friends on the movie, and he wasn't doing too well. He was kind of sitting around, so I said, "Hey, Leon, I got a great idea. I will go ahead and change my name to L.Q. Jones, and of course, when you see that, you'll sue me, take me to court, and we'll get a lot of publicity, and we'll be able to go to work." He said, "It's a great idea." I changed my name. He left and went off and wrote another book. Never saw him again. That's how it happened.
Does the L and the Q in L.Q., does that stand for anything?
Yes, but I can't say it because of the nature of your program. In the picture itself, the L.Q. stood for, I believe, Lauren Quincy. I can't use the... Press on.
Okay. We are a family show, so I appreciate that.
You bet.
Yeah. What do you like playing better, the good guy or the bad guy?
Oh, the bad guy, of course. That's great fun.
It seems like in a Western, playing the bad guy is the way to go because you're getting double the screen time because the way the format's set up, you're plotting to get the good guy, and then when the good guy shows up, you're fighting the good guy. So it seems like the better deal, huh?
It is. And, Michael, it's more fun. It's much more fun to growl and snap at people, to chase women, kick dogs, to just do terrible things than it is to stand there and say inane lines and keep that look on your face and the temperature going. It's just much more fun for me. And a great number of the people in the business, especially on the male side, started out as heavies.
When you got into the business, what was your goal when you first started acting? Was your goal to be the next leading man, the next Hollywood idol like Clark Gable or Tyrone Power or Errol Flynn? Were you trying to be the next big superstar? Were you trying to be someone who was a leading man? Or were you kind of like, you know what, I'm just happy to be here. I'm just hoping that I get paid and make a living at doing this. You know, what was your goal when you became an actor?
Mike, it's very easy to answer that question. I really did not believe that it would go. I didn't think it would go that far. I thought I would end up to picture, shake hands, tell everybody goodbye, and that would be my last voyage onto a soundstage. This was a dream. It had to come to an end, and I was just enjoying it as I went along. But lo and behold, the same people that helped me, saying, you know, you want to do this, do that, be sure you stand here, look for this. I had, good heavens, 150 directors, each one of them saying, do this, be careful of that. You don't do this because. And when that picture was over, I am out. It wasn't, good heavens, it wasn't, I don't know, a month before I had the next part, because Ralph, who at one time wanted to sign me up to a personal contract, but I already had an agent, so it wouldn't work. But a huge man in the business took the time, made the effort to call Don Siegel. Don was doing a movie, and he called up Don and said, hey, here's somebody that's getting started in the business. It can really help your show, I think. You ought to sit down and take a look at him, which he did, and I went to work in that show. And then Don talked to the director of the next one. I did. People just go out of their way, and especially for me, to make things easy for me and help me along. God bless them. They kept me in the business.
The first time I ever saw something you did was back in 1998 when you were in The Mask of Zorro. And it's kind of a funny story because I was very young when that movie came out. I was like only 6 or 7 when that came out. And it's funny because I had actually seen you in a bunch of stuff before that and never put 2 and 2 together and made the connection because, you know, that movie was in the 90s, and some of the stuff that I had seen of you, you know, Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, Rawhide, Have Gun Will Travel, Lawman, The Rebel, Annie Oakley, Wyatt Earp, the list goes on and on of what you did. I had seen you before, so that wasn't actually the first time I was exposed to you. That was like the 25th or 30th time I was exposed to you, but that's the first movie I remember you making. So I have a couple questions about that. You played Three-Fingered Jack in that movie. How did you get that part?
Well, it's a strange bit. Tony, Anthony Hopkins and I was working with Anthony in a picture that came out as what the heck was it? About the bear in Canada. I'll think of it in a minute. Huge picture. Anyway, Tony and I had not worked together, but we had 2 or 3 pivotal scenes in it, and it's one of those things where they had scheduled 3 days to do the shot that Tony and I had, the sequence that we had, and we did it in about 3 or 4 hours and moved on because everybody was happy, including Tony. So it turns out Tony was going to do The Mask of Zorro.
Mm-hmm.
He had talked to Martin Campbell after he had read the script and said, let me tell you something. You have to see this guy, L.Q. Jones, to see if he'll play Three-Fingered Jack, because we just finished. It'd be marvelous for the part. Well, that was great, except they had already sent me the script, and I had turned it down. As it turned out, though, Martin called me again, and we sat down and talked, and I was lucky enough to do it because I listened to how he said he was going to shoot it, and that's how I ended up in The Mask of Zorro.
You just do a fantastic job in that movie. You just have a...
It was a good part.
Amazing.
Plus the fact, what has happened with me, generally, when I am signed to do a part, I'll call the director and or the producer and say that I've read the script. Thank you. It'll be a joy working for you. In many instances, they would say, look, Q, if you don't mind, write it for yourself. We'll approve it or disapprove, whichever the case is, and maybe we can add a little something to it. Well, that happened in Zorro because the director, Martin, said, look, Q, we need color for this. Please sit down and write what you think is right for the part. And again, I'll look at it, and if I don't like it, I'll say so don't get your feelings hurt. But as it turned out, the stuff that I wrote for it, he liked, and we did. And so it was dialogue that I thought belonged, and it was very comfortable for me. But also, you noticed, I'm sure, that I was playing a character that was more, he started out as a heavy, but ended up being a heroic type. And it worked. You were right. First of all, I was talking to a lot of people the other day about Mask. Let me ask you now, when you saw the picture, now you're going to be a little different from most of the general public, but when you saw the picture, did you by any chance buy a DVD of it?
Yes, I have a DVD. Yep.
Almost everybody who goes to see that picture will buy the DVD because it is so entertaining.
Yep.
And it doesn't make any difference.
Yep.
Whether you're 6 or 600, people enjoy it. You were a young person, and so you looked at it one way. Parents look at it another, and yet everybody seems to enjoy it. And for me, it was great fun because I was part of the picture that changed the way motion pictures were made, a picture called The Wild Bunch. Am I right or wrong? The Bunch changed the way people look at heroes and villains. And we went to just unbelievable amounts of action. Now, in the Wild Bunch, the action was triggered and joined to personalities, to the people that were doing the part. So it wasn't just action for action. It was motivating the personalities, each one of the performances, but still brutal in its impact. Of course, today it would be considered a picture almost for children, but back in those days it was a complete change. Mm-hmm. So it changed the way we adapted and did pictures. Now along comes Mask of Zorro, which is just the opposite. They suggest all sorts of violence that never takes place. They have sexual innuendo that never takes place. So I kind of thought we would change the way pictures were being made again. After the change for the Wild Bunch, we'd change back for the Mask, and yet we didn't do it. Do you know why? Can you tell me why we didn't make the change back?
I have no idea, because there's only one scene in the entire movie I could do without. It's the part where he rescues Tornado. I think that kind of is a waste of time. I wasn't a big fan of that. But besides that scene, everything in the movie is perfect.
It belongs there, right? Okay.
Yeah, you get story, you get action, you get a little bit of humor. It's fun. It's just a great. I really think that that's the last great Western. Like, there's some Westerns now that are getting some publicity. Django Unchained and the remake of True Grit. Everyone seemed to have loved that. Me personally, Jeff Bridges, I guess I'm a fan. I like some of his other work, outside of Westerns, but let's be honest. Jeff Bridges isn't even qualified to shine John Wayne's boots. Like, come on.
No,
it's
not
the Duke.
Kind of picture. No.
It's the Duke. It's John Wayne. So I really think that The Mask of Zorro is the last great Western. Since then, 1998 till now, we haven't had any great Westerns. We haven't really had the type of film that captures what made the genre popular in the first place. Back when you were making all these TV shows, there were 40-plus Westerns in prime time. Just in prime time. There were more than that, just whatever that was that made those special. The movies they're making now, it just doesn't have that. There's something about the movies they're making now where they're not Westerns, they're just the regular movie that they're making now, just it happens to take place in the West. It's just a very different type of film than what you were making.
Shame on you, Mike. You sound like me, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Run you out of town on the rail.
Yeah.
It's totally true, and the word you're looking for is heart.
Yeah.
It's missing, and it was heart which is translated to into belief. In the Western, it was you did it yourself. You didn't look for the government to help you. You didn't look for somebody to come show up. You did it yourself. But you believed in yourself, and you believed the outcome would be good because you were on the side of right. As corny as that sounds, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And that is missing in today's pictures. Mm-hmm. And look, there's got to be change. You can't make pictures always the same.
Right.
It's the kids have to make their input. Everybody has to have their say. But we, for some reason, we found it. I don't know. I wish I could say I did it. The hell with it, I didn't. Everybody did it. We found it, and we had people like Peckinpah. We had people like Ford. We had people like Raoul Walsh. There's about 4 or 5 more. And these people, what do I say? These people grew up in life, and that's the way they got their experience. Now the kids grew up looking at television, and that's what we're getting. We're getting more television having nothing to do with life. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. You got me started. Shame on you.
It's okay. Back to The Mask of Zorro, because there's a scene in that movie, and it's your biggest scene and the most crucial scene, I guess you could say, because it kind of starts off, and really from that point on in the movie, it's all downhill from there. That's where we get all the big action and the story really unfolds. It's the part where Don Rafael Montero takes the Dawns to the El Dorado mine, and that's where we find you, because you had been captured earlier in that movie. And I had that same moment, you know, when Capitan Love, when he sees you and he goes, wait, I know you. I had that like 5 or 10 years ago when I was watching that movie and I go, wait, I know that guy. That's L.Q. Jones. I remember him from all those TV shows that I watched, you know, Gunsmoke and the list I named off a little bit earlier. I was like, I finally made the connection because, you know, when I saw that movie, I was like, what, 5 or 6 years old, maybe 7 when that movie came out. So I never looked at credits, and back then the internet wasn't what it is now. So there was no way of knowing. You had to just know who these guys were. And I had that moment that Capitan Love has where you call him Peckerwood. I had that moment where he goes, wait, I know you. And I had that a couple years ago. And I was like, yeah, that's L.Q. Jones. That's great. You know, you blew me away with that performance. You just had an amazing performance. Now, one thing I always wanted to ask you, can you call me Peckerwood? Can you recite those lines?
Well, first you have to give credit where it's due. That's the word that Sam liked to use, Peckinpah.
Okay.
If you remember in the Wild Book, we used Peckerwood.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I've gotten used to it. Strother and I used it all the time. I used it all the time. It's a put down, but it means absolutely everything and nothing to call somebody here Peckerwood. It just works. I don't know why it is.
Right.
So I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's great fun to do it.
Yeah.
We came close to disaster in doing that scene. I had been there. God, I went down to do my wardrobe because the wardrobe took us almost a week to put together. And then we were ready to shoot. And the weather would screw us. We'd get ready. I'd get up on the cart at the top of the hill there to come down. And we'd fold and come back the next day, and I'd sit around all day. And it went on for about, 10 or 15 days that way. And finally, we got to do it. And the words worked. Everything worked for it. But then, let me go back. I went too far. We were ready to shoot it, and then we were scheduled it for a coming Monday. We thought surely we'd be able to make it. That Saturday that we finished at noon, they started doing some stunts on it, and they got carried away, and they burned that entire set on Sunday. The one, and you know what it looked like, right?
Right.
It covered the whole side of that mountain. Mm-hmm. And so they had to put on hundreds of workers to get it reconstructed so that when we got there on Monday, we could shoot it. And if you look at the scene, it starts one way, then it goes another, it changes again, then it changes in midair. We almost lost the stuntman who was doubling me. I came down the cart, as you recall,
right
down the side of the mine. Mm-hmm. I had exactly 1/4 of an inch clearance at one place because of the way the thing was set. And then when I got airborne, they cut. And we put a stuntman, my stunt double, went in to do it. And then when they did it with him, we were all standing around watching because it was a hell of a stunt being jerked around in midair. And they started it. He went airborne. And then I realized, and I was standing next to the man who was saying that the whole stunt was pulled off, stopped him immediately because one of the steel wires that was needed to jerk him back in midair had gotten around his throat. Mm-hmm. And if they had pulled it the way they had planned, it would have cut his head off. So it was, the whole thing was fraught with danger, but it was more fun, and I really enjoyed that scene, and I can understand why that character would stick with you, because it sticks with both everybody. Mm-hmm. Almost everybody remembers that scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One question I really wanted to ask you about that scene was, okay, so you go down in the cart, you got the pick, you're ready to jump at Capitan Love, he shoots you. Then you're on the ground, and then Don Rafael Montero is like Peckerwood, and the Dons start laughing, and then Antonio Banderas, who, you know, for the people listening who haven't seen the movie or have seen it but don't remember, L.Q's character and Antonio Banderas, they were friends at the beginning of this movie. So Antonio Banderas and L.Q, they know each other. So Antonio Banderas, his character, comes over to check on you. Now, the question I wanted to ask you was, in the script, what is that calling for? Is he supposed to, or your character, Three Finger Jack, is he supposed to recognize that Antonio Banderas is that guy? You know, what is that moment in the script? You know, what does that call for? What are we supposed to be seeing? Is it just Antonio Banderas is sad to see you go, or do you two have a moment where you recognize him and are like, oh, okay, you know, he's made something of himself? You know, what is that moment?
Well, you have just put it forward, but it fits into it. It is more complicated than that, and that is that if he knows me, then he reveals who he is. He can't do that. If he does that, then it screws up all that you set up at that point. So what he's got to do is, between he and I, and it worked, between he and I realizing he looked with his eyes and his face, he was having to say to a friend, I am sorry that I had to do this. And yet my look back at him has got to say, I understand that, and I understand why you're not saying anything else. All of that has to be done in a capsule of, what, 20 seconds? Something like that. And it works. You can, I've tried to describe it to people, you can't do it. But you caught it when you saw it. It's one of those things, you understand what it is when you see it, but you can't describe it.
Yeah. It's an amazing scene, top to bottom. Yeah. It's amazing. The ending too, where Capitan Love is just, he's got this sick look on his face, and he's doing some laugh, and Antonio Banderas goes up to him and he's like, is something funny? And he's like, yeah, this is the second time I've shot this guy while he was flying through the air.
It's a beautiful line.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful line.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tony, didn't he do a hell of a job?
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
Listen, when you're dealing with Hopkins, you're fighting for your life anyway.
Yeah.
He is so spectacular. But this is between me and thee. You may want to cut this off your feet. The Tony who came around, I don't know, 3 or 4 times during the shooting saying, L.Q, help me here, is it working? He was not comfortable in what he was doing. And yet, look at it, in the overall, in the piece, he's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Anthony Hopkins, the scene where his house is being burnt down and he's being taken off to prison, and Montero has his daughter, I get choked up every time I see that scene. It's a very powerful scene.
And it's more than you're looking at. The professionals have done that work, and it works for you. That Zorro had no reason to work as well as it did. It's one of those things where you just hope you can do 1 or 2 scenes in the piece that will work, that will carry the load. But as you said, for you, every scene in it works except one.
Yeah.
And it's that way with most people. And a great deal of it has to do with Tony, who, as far as I'm concerned, this doesn't bear on anybody else. I was really fortunate to work with him. He, I think at that point in time, was the best actor in our business. And when he was working and you were working with him, truly, you were fighting to stay alive. I mean, he was helping. He wasn't trying to steal. He's just that good.
Yeah.
And that's what was bothering Antonio, because he wasn't sure he was registering, and more important, he wasn't sure that he was being funny warm. But he was. I don't believe anybody could do the job that he did other than Tony.
Yeah.
and he was just perfect for it. And anyway, it was fun. What can you say? You don't get to repeat a picture like that many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a phenomenal film.
Yeah.
Outside of that one scene, but even that one scene, I've still seen it. I've watched it 1,000 times. That's just my one little critique of the movie, and it is a very, very little critique of the movie. I'm not saying anything. It's pretty close to being a perfect movie in my opinion. And like you mentioned, Anthony Hopkins, I've heard rumors about who else was considered to be Don Diego / Zorro, and how you know that he has a perfect performance in that role is you can't picture anyone else doing it. That's how you know he's perfect. I can't imagine anyone else except Anthony Hopkins playing that part. He just does an amazing job, and it's such a great movie. Now, of course, the sequel wasn't that good, but The Mask of Zorro alone, that's a great movie. One question I really wanted to ask you was, because you're from that era, in the 50s and 60s, you were working on TV shows and were, getting a good start in the business for yourself. Were you ever disappointed that you never got to be on the Guy Williams Zorro TV series, the Disney series? Because here you are, you're of that era, and then the first time you're getting a crack at being in a Zorro production, it's in the 90s on The Mask of Zorro. So were you ever disappointed that you never got a part on the Guy Williams Zorro?
No, let me answer that, but then let's go back to something again. It wasn't that I didn't have the chance. I had to turn down, I don't know, 2 or 3 offers for it because I was doing something else. It's just one of those things like, damn it, what was the most popular, other than Gunsmoke, what was the one with the 3 brothers?
Bonanza,
thank you. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, the only major Western series I didn't do. And people say, what happened? Well, what happened was they offered, I don't know, 6 or 7 shows, but I was always busy. The same thing was true of the one you asked about. But let's go back to, because you said something that's very important to me. We're now old. We're going to do the show Mask of Zorro, and we're down in Mexico City. We're doing a read-through, so everybody can say, I like this, or the director can say, look, here we want to do, so forth and so on. Now, so we read, and I don't know, we worked for about 4 or 5 hours, and we broke for lunch. Now, we are standing outside, and there are, I don't know, 50 of us that have been in the reading, and I'm standing there talking to the director, Martin, and 2 other people. Now, remember, I have just finished 6 or 7 weeks working with Tony. The Edge was the name I was trying to think of, the bear movie. Mm-hmm. Just finished it before I started on this one. Now, I'm standing there talking to these people, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this character flit by, and he was just bouncing along. The cape was billowing behind him. I'm saying, God, who the hell is that? And he goes by me, and there's 2 or 3 beats, and Tony's voice says, what's the matter here, L.Q.? Have you forgotten your old friend? It's Tony. He had changed the way he walked. He had changed the way he had dressed. He changed the way he spoke. That's a great actor, but so much that I didn't even recognize him when we first saw him. Mm-hmm. How you like them Apple sports fans?
In the beginning of that movie...
What you were saying.
Yeah, in the beginning of that movie, you can't really even tell that that's him, In the beginning of the movie, it's supposed to be 20 years earlier than the bulk of the movie, and you can't really even tell that that's Anthony Hopkins. You think it's a completely different actor, younger...
somebody else, but you are right. Can you picture that part being done by anybody else at that point in time?
No.
But the same could be said of Antonio. The same could be said of many people in the picture itself. That's what happens. You do pictures, but all of a sudden things start to work. You don't know why they're working, but they are. And when you get through with it, you've got The Mask of Zorro. You've got Sam Peckinpah's Ride the High Country, or The Wild Bunch, or The Ballad of Cable Hogue. There is a magic that works in pictures. Not very often, but when it works, it is a beautiful thing to behold. And you've just talked about it, because if you took Tony out of that picture, I believe the rest of it would probably collapse. What do you think?
I'm 100% with you. I couldn't have said it any better, because I've seen some of the rumors. You know, the internet, you can never really trust what you read on there. I've seen different actors like Sean Connery. They considered him for the role, and you know, he's a good actor, and nothing wrong with him. You know, James Bond, you got to love the guy, but I can't see it. It's got to be Anthony Hopkins. The way the character is set up, he's the only guy who can pull it off. You know, here's a guy who, at the beginning of the movie, he thinks, my life's great. I got this great wife, got a daughter, I don't have to be Zorro anymore. Montero's leaving California, this is great. And then he has his whole world turn upside down, and he's been in jail for 20 years. It's a very, very beautiful movie. From the story, the way it's shot, the performances, just a great movie. And how Antonio Banderas and Anthony Hopkins, their characters, in a strange way, there's differences, of course, they mirror each other. They're both out to try and get revenge. You got Antonio Banderas, Capitan Love, killed his brother, and then you have Don Raphael stole away Don Diego's daughter, so you have that comparison. And then also there's the mirror image of the good guys and the bad guys, because you have Zorro, Don Diego, the aging Zorro, and then you have this younger guy who's going to take his place. But at the same time, you have that on the other end. You have Don Raphael, who's the older man, and then you have this other guy who eventually I would assume is going to step into that role that Don Raphael has, and you have the good guy and the bad guy both hate each other, and then you have their apprentice. They don't like each other either. So you have this very interesting dynamic where they mirror each other and they don't like each other, and it plays off very well. It's just a beautiful movie from start to finish. So I really had to ask you about that movie, because you know you're in it and you do a great job, and it's a fantastic movie. One thing I really wanted to ask you also was, did you get to keep the prosthetic fingers? Did you get to keep any of that stuff?
I knew what you were going to ask. No, because I'll tell you how that came about, and that was one of the things that the reason I took the picture. When I went to talk to Martin the second time, I had been thinking about the part, because I had read the script and was while we were up on the other show. And one of the things, and you'll know what I'm talking about here, an actor doing a part where he has lost part of his, the visible part of his body, an arm, a leg, whatever, it restricts how you shoot the picture, because you've got to have the actor facing a certain way so the camera does not see that he is not missing a leg or an hand or whatever. So I was thinking, since I direct, how I would do that, and all of a sudden it occurred to me. And so when I talked to Martin, I said, have you ever considered this? And I explained that in the missing the two fingers, that if we capped them with the casings for bullets, people would know what happened to the fingers, and we could actually look at it. Mm-hmm. Martin heard that, and he nearly hit the ceiling, and he said, let me take care of that. When next I saw it, they had come up with the hand, with the fingers. And if you looked at it, it cost about $25,000 to put together. But If you remember, instead of just my casings for the bullets, the fingers were there, the fingernails were there, a ring was there, a toothpick was there, mm-hmm. a knife was folded into it, and there were 3 or 4 more things that were built into the knife that unfortunately, into the fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the picture was so busy, we didn't have time to go in and show you all of the things that the hands had. And I begged them for that hand, but no, they kept it, and rightly so, because it cost so damn much money.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a beauty to behold.
Did you get to keep anything from that movie? A hat, boots, something?
Oh, then anything else I wanted I could have. No, because the wardrobe was so filthy. It took me every day to put it on, and to put the makeup on took slightly over an hour and a half. It took me somewhere around 35 or 40 minutes at night to take it off.
Mm-hmm.
You had to use all sorts of lotions and soaps and greases. And so I tell you what, you could smell me downwind for about a block and a half. I was the gamiest actor on the set. So no, I didn't care for anything else about the wardrobe but the hand.
What about some of the other work you've done? Do you have any props, any costumes, anything like that? What's in your archives?
Oh God, I've got 7 or 8 pairs of boots, 100 shirts. Invariably, I love wardrobe. Absolutely adore it, and I do so much work on it that the people who are helping me put it together, actually they're putting it together, and I'm helping them. They always give me a pair of boots,
mm-hmm.
which didn't make much difference then. That was, you could get a good pair of boots for $75 or $100. Now my boots cost me. It's not unusual to see a boot costing $2,000, $2,500. But a lot of my stuff in the business, I did a picture called Mrs. Sundance, which was about Butch Cassidy. And my wardrobe in there cost, what was it, $30-some-odd thousand, because they built everything to go with a particular character that I was playing, which was a real character. Incidentally, Three-Fingered Jack is the only character in The Mask of Zorro that actually existed. He's part of history. As a matter of fact, somebody gave me a book a couple of years ago outlining Three Fingers and what he did. He was not a nice person. He was truly a pain in the butt. Mm-hmm. But he did exist. And that was just for me, one of the fun pieces of the part. To do something was actually a part of history.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, as he was in the something about California when it was recognized, so forth and so on, got a lot of attention. Anyway, it was just fun doing Three Finger, and that I know people. It's amazing how many people have seen the picture, and I will see people even today. I'll see people on the street. I'm driving my convertible or whatever, and people will hold up and say, hey, and they'll stick up 3 fingers.
Yeah.
Not one, fortunately, but 3. So I know they're talking about The Mask of Zorro.
I always say the only people who don't like that movie are people who have never seen it.
You're probably very close. I have never, ever, now that you mention it, I can't recall ever having anyone tell me they did not enjoy the picture.
Yeah.
That's unusual for a picture. Because everybody's not for the second coming of Christ. To think you can make a picture that everybody's going to like. It don't work that way, kids. But I've never heard anyone, and I find the reason in talking to the people who have seen the picture and bought the DVD is because they say, aha, I'm a parent. I can show it to my kids, and I'm not embarrassed. I don't have to worry about the language. And they say, it'll titillate you a little bit, but it doesn't show you anything specific that you don't really need to know. And so that's why I like it, and I like a copy of it, and people seem to see it on a regular basis. They don't just buy it and put it away. Every month or so, they take it out and look at it. So it's great fun to be part of a picture like that.
I see it on TV all the time. All those movie channels, I see it on there all the time. And even if it's at the end of the movie or halfway through it, I'll put it on, put it in the background just for fun. I've seen it about 1,000 times. I love Zorro. I'm a huge Zorro fan. One of my favorite movies all time is The Mark of Zorro with Tyrone Power. That's probably my all-time favorite movie, and I love Guy Williams as Zorro. I've seen all the Republic serials from the 30s and 40s that they did with Zorro as the main character. I love Zorro. I'm a huge Zorro fan, so I watch that movie, The Mask of Zorro, all the time. Really enjoy that movie, and like we were talking about earlier, the movie has a little bit of something for everybody. You know, everybody can enjoy this movie, young and old. So it's just
that makes no difference.
Yeah.
And I can understand, but I can understand why you like Zorro, because he is the superhero, but like all superheroes, he blends in with just the rest of us normal folks. Mm-hmm. But what he believes, what he is willing to sacrifice to see that the little person is taken care of, really is what makes him as huge as he is. Mm-hmm. And goodness knows the Hispanic population has taken a bunch of kicks, mm-hmm. and they can applaud somebody like Zorro, and it's amazing. I don't think I've talked to a Hispanic person of any age since we made the picture that hasn't seen The Mask of Zorro. Mm-hmm. They just really like it, and they can count me in that group. I really like it.
Yeah.
Like I say, you don't get to do that very often. I did it with Mask. I did it with Ride the High Country, which is probably a lot of critics think is the best Saturday afternoon Western ever made. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. I got to make a Ballad of Cable Hogue. I got to make The Wild Bunch. I got to make Casino. I've just been very lucky in the pictures that have allowed me to join the cast. You know, mm-hmm. So
yeah.
Shuck, what can I say?
Another role I wanted to ask you about was the 3 episodes you did on the TV series Cheyenne with Clint Walker. You played Smitty. You were his sidekick in 3 episodes. Now, I've heard rumors, and I really want you to clear this up for me, because I've heard all the rumors. I've heard why you left that show was because of a contract dispute. You wanted more money. I heard that they just wanted to go in a different direction because, you know, he's supposed to be the lonely man Cheyenne, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense for him to have a sidekick. I've heard you didn't like being a sidekick. I've heard all these different rumors. I don't know what's true and what's false, but can you clear that up for us? Why did you leave Cheyenne? Why did you only do 3 episodes?
Okay, fair question. Not too many people know this. I was signed to do Cheyenne long before Clint was, and I was supposed to play Smitty, and he was going to play. When they finally found him, he was going to do that. But we had a director that I'll clean this up. We bumped into each other in the green room, and he said, "You don't like me, do you?" And I said, "I'm cleaning this up," but I told him that I wouldn't spit in his mouth if his brains were on fire, because I found the man to be a liar, untalented, the rest of the stuff. But that's not really the reason. I realized after 1 episode, and it came fairly early, I had done about 8 or 9 pictures, and now here is a television, not only television, but a series. And I didn't like the character the way he was, and I wanted to change him. The director wouldn't let me, so I did it. But I realized, hey, if I want to stay in this business, I got to learn more about my business, and I'm not going to do it by doing a part like Smitty. That was helped by the same reason that, to me, it's a one-person show. It was for Clint. Cheyenne, that's what the show was about. And so I went to see Steve Trilling. You won't know the name probably, but Steve is the man that actually ran Warner Brothers. Mr. Warner stood up, made public appearances, and cashed the checks. Steve was the one who really ran the show on a day-to-day basis, the studio. And he happened to be a fan of mine. And I told him what I thought. And he said, look, we had great plans for you, because I was under contract to Warner's.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I was under contract to Warner's as an actor, not as an actor for television. So they said, we got great plans for you. And I told him the same thing I've told you. And he said, well, let me think about it. And oddly enough, I was doing another picture called Toward the Unknown with Bill Holden. And I was working with Mervyn LeRoy. Remember the name?
Vaguely.
Okay. He was huge in the business. He was directing it. And so I'm trying to get out from under my contract. I'm doing this with Mervyn, and we're sitting in his office one day, and he said, you ought to shake my hand. I said, what for? He says, I'm fighting tooth and nail to keep you under contract. And I thought I was going to kill him right on the spot when I was doing all the work. But Steve finally said, okay, we see what you're talking about. And he released me, and that was it. Had nothing to do with money. I wasn't unhappy with the part. I just thought it should be different. But I also am glad that I was able to leave. I was so clever, I cost myself about $8 million.
Well, we can't get you that $8 million back, but at least we cleared up all the rumors, because I've heard them all. I've heard a lot of crazy stuff on why you left that show. Never the true version, never what you just said. I heard.
Oh, you never hear that.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Clint is a super nice person. He truly is. He did a hell of a job in that, and I think if I were in it to divide up what they would have to do to give us somewhat equal time, would have hurt the series, which is what I told Mr. Trilling. And let there be no doubt from anybody that I didn't care for Clint and didn't enjoy the work that I did. And he is such a nice man that it's great fun to be just among his friends. But I'm glad to clear it up to you, Mike. So press on.
When people think about Sam Peckinpah, the first movie that pops into everyone's head is The Wild Bunch. But personally, I think that Ride the High Country is his best movie and is the better movie of the two. You can't go wrong. You got James Drury, Randolph Scott, Joel McRae. You got all these great actors, Warren Oates. I know he crossed over in The Wild Bunch as well, but hey, it's still a great cast there. So you're with me, Ride the High Country over The Wild Bunch for Sam Peckinpah's best Western?
Put your name down and put a star by it, because again, you sound like me. I think Ride the High Country is truly the best. I say Saturday afternoon, hold your girl's hand, eat popcorn. Mm-hmm. It's perfect. Joel and Randy were magnificent. Mm-hmm. But the difference to me is that, and I had a chance to, is the Ride the High Country is a motion picture, and it is a gorgeous motion picture. The Wild Bunch is a happening. It, as a picture, it's fractured in many places, but it's great fun to look at. But as far as being pure entertainment, then Ride the High Country. I think, the Ballad of Cable Hogue is better than The Wild Bunch. But I really had a chance to watch it because I was doing Casino, and I had done what I had gone up to do the first 3 or 4 days, and I had a week or so off beforehand, and so I came back home. And Marty asked me to go look at a print of The Wild Bunch that he had helped raise the money to redo. It was kind of falling off the negative. So I said, would you go look at it and tell me what you think? You bet. Glad to do it. So when I went over the night, they invited me to see it. And there was a crowd of, 150 people there to see it. And just before we went in, I was out talking to a couple of people, and Mariette Hartley came up. Mariette and I were friends from many, many shows, but we had done Ride the High Country together. Mm-hmm. And so we visited for a few minutes. He said, I know this is strange, but I've never seen The Wild Bunch. What is it about? Mm-hmm. And I started to try to explain it to her, and then I realized that, wait a minute, tell you what, let's go look. We're about to go see it right now. let's go look at it, and when it's over, then I'll see if you still want the question answered. So we did. As it so happened, I was seated right behind her. And when the picture was over and the lights came on, everybody stood up and started talking. And there was a beat of about 2 or 3 minutes. I didn't move. I just waited. Mariette turned around, and her eyes were big as saucers. She didn't have to say anything else. I knew what she had just gone through, because the Wild Bunch is a happening beyond belief. It changed, which we talked about earlier. It changed the way motion pictures were shown to the public. And yet most of it is not visual, but is suggested to you in things that are said and things you don't see. But it is truly violent in that respect. A lot of people, what's her name, Hale in New York City, said it's the biggest piece of trash ever put on screen. People screamed, you could hear them for miles, and yet people flooded to see it. Because it is that arresting when you look at it. But as far as better entertainment, as far as better technique, Ride the High Country is far and away, to me, a better picture.
Actor you enjoyed working with the most?
Again, it's one of those, it depends on the day. It's amazing how people hide behind a facade for the public, but when you get to know them, they're totally different. In the good way, not the bad way. But I just was lucky to work with the huge people in the business, especially men. I didn't get to work with that many ladies that were that huge. But when you're talking about Bill Holden, they get no bigger. You've got Brando. You got Montgomery Clift. It's Randy is superb. Joel is one of the greatest human beings God ever created, and you get to see him on the side, and you realize just how warm and true they are. And I got to work with some of the biggest and the best, and it's a privilege to be able to just be associated with them, much less to try to work with them.
During your career, did you ever get starstruck? And if so, who was the actor?
We had finished Battle Cry, and I went to have lunch with Ralph. And we were at Warner's, and we left the green room, and we're walking back towards the main offices, and we got to the tennis court, which is the one that was bombed in From Here to Eternity. And a tennis game was going on with Sally Biano, who was the man in charge of casting at Warner Brothers, mainly because he was a hellacious tennis player, but he also a talented man. And he was playing tennis with whom? Clark Gable.
Oh.
Ralph and Clark were huge friends. And so he took me with him and went over and talked with Clark for 15 or 20 minutes, I guess. And all I could do was stutter and gape. I don't believe I formed one complete, understandable word in 15 minutes. And he was as warm as any human being could ever be. He was talking about what I had done in the picture business. What I had done in the picture business in one picture. Here he's Clark Gable, but that's the way he was. And I completely starstruck. But I was practically that way around Tony, having seen his work but never met him. And we now have a sequence that only he and I are in. Elle is on the side down below doing a fashion shot. But what the hell how am I going to stay alive working with Anthony? To me, the best man in the business. And then I got to work years before that with Jason Robards 2 or 3 times, and I got to direct him even once. To me, in that period of time, Jason was probably the best actor in our business. Not the most famous, not getting the most money, but the best actor. And I've been just so lucky to work with people like that who help you as you go along. I can't think of any other business where that happens, but I was blessed and it happened to me.
Actor you learn the most from?
Everyone I've worked with. Each one has a little different thing. Like I told you on Battle Cry, I had a hell of a time. I'd never seen a motion picture soundstage or camera. And so I had everybody on the crew, the photographer, it would say, look, kid, is that where you're going to stand? Well, yeah, I thought so, fine. You know, you're going to look like Step and Fetch It because where's your light? You can't stand there. I can't move the light around. If you want to do it, get smart. Look for your key light. Look for this. The sound man says, quit bumbling, kid. Speak up so we can hear you. Everybody is helping. Now, to cap that, Raoul took my part, which was very minor, reasonably minor at the beginning, and he took most of the work from 2 or 3 other characters and added to mine. Now, you can imagine how popular I was with actors who had been in the business for 5 or 10 years, having their parts taken away and given to some kid who had never been in a motion picture in his life. And yet, by the same token, those same people would say, look, Hugh, you might want to try this or that, because that might not work. And that's the way I've found the whole business. Tony was, everybody has been helpful for me. And I'm just very lucky. I hate to be Pollyanna about this, but God, I got to tell you the truth.
During that era, there were so many Westerns on TV, and you had done basically all of them. So I'm interested in knowing, because you're bouncing around from show to show to show. One minute you're doing The Rebel, the next minute you're doing Have Gun Will Travel, the next minute you're doing Lawman, the next minute you're doing The Rifleman. You're bouncing around from all these different shows. How would you get a role on a particular Western TV series, regardless of what the show was? How would you get a part on that show? Because it seems like everything is moving so fast and there really isn't time for auditions. So how would you get a part on a Western TV series? Was it by reputation, or did you have to audition? You know, how would you get a part on one of these shows at that time?
Okay, well, you have to understand that our business, while it appears huge, is very tiny.
Mm-hmm.
A few people run it. A few people are successful. Most people are not. But they talk a lot. And they talk so much about defeat because that's what they're trying to evade. But anytime something comes along that's new, they will pass it around. Either the heads of the studio, which is less likely than the people who cut it, because the people who cut it see the work. They get to realize, aha, I can use this character because he will save me a lot of work, and it will be better for the story because he can do these different things. They talk. They talk to producers. Producers talk to directors. And there were only, I was lucky. I worked in maybe the top 2 or 3% of our business with the people you mentioned. The Wilkies, John, the McGraw, the Charlies, Warren Oates, John Anderson, Struther, Slim Pickett, Ben Johnson. There were about 10 or 15 of us that did almost 90% of the work. And when that's the case, the people, if I did a Gunsmoke, if it were good or if it were sensational, whatever, they would talk to their friends who are producing another show. Plus, these people are always looking at television, watching other shows while they're working, because they're constantly then, because that's what was running the business, was television, constantly in need of people. You said there were 60-some-odd Westerns. I think actually there were more than that.
Right. That was just in prime time. There were more outside of prime time, but just in prime time.
Let's say 100, I don't know what number, of shows on, that were constantly on, probably 85 to 90% of them were Westerns. So they were constantly on the lookout. Ben was good because he was a tremendous horseman.
Right.
He was also just a natural actor. Mm-hmm. I'm good on horseback because I'd done it for years and years and years. So that helped me. And it's like anything else. People talk about success. They're bearing the burden of failure, so they know that. But I spent, like every other actor, in the first 5 or 6 years of the business, I'd go on interviews where they even didn't know me, but the casting person knew of me or knew me and would suggest he may take a look. And you go out and you talk to the people who are going to direct or the producers, and that's what you do. Now, once I got started, I was very lucky. I've been in the business 60-some odd years. After about 5 or 6 years, I didn't have to go on interviews. They would call my agent and say, we want you for this, that, and the other. And the fight was on for money. But I was very lucky. If you weren't lucky, you continued to go to the interviews. You went to the studios. You talked. You did tests. I didn't do many tests. Normally the tests I did were to do pilots for a proposed television show after the first 5 or 6 years. But I was lucky. The old man smiled on me. It is very tough. It was very tough to get into the business then. It's tougher now. But see, certain things, if I had come along now instead of when I did, could I have gotten the job? I don't know, because they don't make any Westerns anymore.
Right.
They make pictures they call Westerns, but they can either make them as a Western or they can put them in a convertible and buying stock, and you got the same story, just a different setting.
Right.
We were heavy into that, and so that helped me get the first leg up. And once I did that, then I did Westerns still, but by the same token, I did other pieces. And for me, I started off doing comedy, and I could not talk them into doing anything except comedy. Except when I went to do a Rebel interview, Andy, who's the producer of it, finally let me do a heavy. I was nominated for an Emmy for the heavy that I did. Now I'm started off. Now they won't let me do anything but heavies. I can't do any comedy. And people talk, that's the way you get shows. It's kind of hard to explain.
Whether it was on TV or in a movie, is there any character, if it was possible for you to reprise that role, is there any character that you played during your career that you would like another chance to play?
Oh, good heavens, yes. The number of, the one you pointed out, I love Three Fingers. Morgan and I were going to do a show with Jeannie Nolan. I would love to have redone that. Sam was going to do it. He wanted to do it. We were going to reprise a couple of characters from, what the hell was it? I think it was Ride the High Country. I did a character known as Lummy on Oklahoma Strip, which is in the National Archives. I did with Joseph Cotton. I would love to have redone that. Other than that, there are not many characters. If I didn't like the character, I wouldn't do it.
Right.
Liking doesn't mean that I thought he was great. And like, for instance, I did the first all-black Gunsmoke, and the only one they ever did, I think. Huge cast, marvelous actors. And I was the heavy in that, and I was a heavy. I mean, I was terrible. I kicked dogs, raped women, beat up on kids, and I was so bad that about 3 months later, when they ran it, and they ran it on a Sunday, it was a 2-hour show as opposed to their hour show. Anyway, I was working that Monday, and I was driving to work with my top down. I was wearing my MG, and the traffic hit about Balboa, and you could only inch forward. But people, from the time I got there to about 30 or 35 minutes later, when I pulled into the studio, people boo and hiss the whole trip. So they had all seen Gunsmoke. It was a tribute to Gunsmoke. Mm-hmm. But I'd love to redo that character, although I'm not sure I could live through it.
During your time making Westerns, did you do a lot of your own stunts?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets awfully boring to just go up and talk, although I did a lot of action stuff, so that was there. But I made a deal whenever I was going to do a show where there was X amount of action, especially for my character, I would make a deal with my stuntman. And normally I had the same stuntman in most of the shows, but I would look at it and see the stunts that I wanted to do. Then he would look at it and say, no, don't try to do this one or this one. This one's fine. This one's fine. Leave this one alone. I was, oddly enough, one of the few actors that most of the stuntmen would work with doing stunts because I enjoyed it so much, and I was so careful to be sure that I was not a threat to them and their safety. And I could do things like being drug along with the stagecoach, having the fighting. I've fallen out of 3-story windows. I've had things happen on trains. Great fun, but what happens is once they determine what it is going to be, and then you sit and determine the price. It isn't, there's no contract, there's no magazine you can go to that says, for doing this you get this much money. You go in and you negotiate. So then my stuntman would go in and come up and negotiate the price. I would do the stunt, and he got paid for it. I didn't want to take his word, for Christ's sake. He was making a fortune from my doing his stunts. But I love to do stunts. They're great fun.
What was your most challenging role?
That's hard to answer. What would it be? I mean, one might be... I can't answer that. There is no answer to that, I guess, Mike.
Okay. No worries.
I don't mean to say it that way. It's a good question. I've done so much of it.
Actor you never got a chance to work with that you would have liked to have worked with?
I was thinking about the other day, who the hell was it? There have been a number of them because, as you pointed out, if you took Tony out of Mask of Zorro, it would really fracture. And I love to watch a good actor work, whether I like the part or not, or the picture is immaterial. And it doesn't happen too often. There are not many actors in our business. Most of them are personalities. And so I can watch someone and never meet them, but absolutely just stand transfixed by what they do in the picture. And there are a number of them. It's hard to go back and put a finger on it. But it's that you really appreciate real talent. So little of it exists. I mean, you can count the actors on the fingers of one hand in our business, maybe two hands. There are not many of them around. But boy, a good one is a thing of beauty to watch. And almost everybody that I've been around that I've watched, I had watched before. People that you don't think about. Anthony, Thomas Gomez. You know who I'm talking about?
No.
One of the great actors of all times. And yeah, very few people know him. I've worked with people like that that I had admired for years, and then working with them realized that's the way they are. They're just huge talents, and they were able to bring it to the screen. And that's tough to do. It may sound easy. It's easier for a big star to do it because you have a lot more time to do your work. But a good character person may only have 5 or 10 seconds to establish himself and what he is trying and needs to say. I don't mean vocally, but what the character must contribute to the piece. You don't have much time. And so when you see someone like him or John McIntyre, and the list goes on, for Christ's sakes, to watch what they can do and then try to, in your mind, do it. Could you do it the way they've done it? And the answer, without any equivocation, is no, because they are special to that. And then to be able to work with those people and not feel embarrassed when you get through with what you're doing is just a great blessing for me. And because you always worry, can you measure up? And I don't believe anybody in our business who is successful does not think, good God, tomorrow everybody's going to wake up and realize I have no talent. We're all that way. You just don't believe you can do the job, and then you end up doing the job. So what can I tell you?
Whether it was a movie that you made or a TV show that you made, regardless of what kind of film it was, when was the last time you sat down and watched something that you made?
I don't watch things that I have made. For a very good reason. It drives you insane. When I first started, I would watch to see, and then I realized that I could not for a second please myself. I'm wondering the entire time, why did you make that move? Why didn't you do this, dimwit? This is terrible. You should have stopped here. This belongs, but it's too much of that. And so you sit there, as I do. I embarrass myself. I'm so lost. I have no talent whatsoever. I'm wondering how the hell I got a job. So I learned fairly quickly not to do it because it drives me insane. If I'm directing, I don't want my cast to do it because you will look at it. I'm getting a certain thing, and there is a homogeneous collection of things that I want done that I want your character to do. But if you start looking and you start wondering, why did I move at this point? Why did I not do that? You're going to start giving me a wooden performance, and I don't want that. I want you to just give me what you feel. Well, I found out I can't do that by watching, and I don't think other people can either, and so I ask them not to do it. And almost every time I direct, that's almost the first thing I say. So for me, no, I don't watch it. I gave up early in the game.
Last question, L.Q. Right now, are you retired? Are you semi-retired? Or are you ready to work tomorrow if you got the right part and they called you? What's the status of your career right now?
Number 3, I retired the first day I stepped on the set of Battle Cry, and I would literally put an extra pair of pants in a suitcase and be off to Tokyo an hour from now, which I've done on several occasions, because to be in the business. And retired, again, retired from what? I'm doing exactly what I like and love, so that's not a problem. But I also have scruples, if you will, or have beliefs. And when in my eye, it doesn't do it, then I tend not to. I turn things down. My poor agent's starving to death because I keep turning down all this money, but I don't want to do the part. And it'll change again. All of a sudden, it'll start. They will. Well, as a matter of fact, I won't mention it, but there was a part last year that the director, who had won the Academy Award twice in a row, I think, wanted me to do a picture for him and was trying to get me to come in for an interview, and I wouldn't do it because he wouldn't send me the script, and I wasn't about to go to some place. But it finally, after about 6 or 7 months, we got together and we talked about the thing for about, 45 minutes or so, and we got down to the end and said, okay, L.Q., be honest with me now. You don't really want to do my picture, do you? And I had to tell him, no, Alex, I really don't. I admire you for doing it, but it's not the kind of part I want to do. And it was a gorgeous part. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, whoever did the part got nominated for an Oscar. But like I say, I'm independently poor. I can do what I want to do. And I've kind of formed my ideal of what I want to do. But if you come up with the right picture, money has nothing to do with it. I'd be there in New York second.
L.Q., this was a great time talking to you. I've been a fan of yours for as long as I can remember. I've watched you all the time, and this has been an honor and a privilege to speak with you today. This was great. This was a lot of fun. I could talk to you all day. All day I could talk to you.
Mike, you have no taste. This is what makes my business fun. How many times do you compliment a guy for selling your insurance policy? Not too often, but I get to meet great people. I get to work with great people and do something I really enjoy. So to me, it's great fun to discuss with someone what our business is, what makes it go together, who asks intelligent, thoughtful questions. And it's been my pleasure and privilege. So I thank you.
L.Q., thank you for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
It has been my pleasure. You got my phone number. If you want to ask any questions or say something, give me a call.